Getting to the heart of the matter, I want to introduce to you some friends of mine, Biff and Mabel. They have a marriage problem, and I want to bring them out and walk through carefully how to help them with their problem as we identify what the issue is that's going on in their marriage, but then what is the problem, the true problem of the heart that we want to identify. With all discipleship situations, there is a starting point, and the starting point is, honestly, it's quite simple. It just begins with a very basic question. Why did you come to counseling? Why are you here? What I almost always ask a person that I meet with is, how can I help you? Or how may I serve you? That's the most common way that I ask it, but you can say, why did you come to counseling? However you say it, you're wanting them to give you an answer, and they will give you an answer. And it is important for you to understand that no matter what they say, they will not tell you what the core problem is. It would be exceptional for them to tell you what the real, technical, theologically accurate core issue is in their individual life or their lives. What they are going to tell you is what's going on the surface of their lives, what's happening in their living room, what happened last night. But they're coming to you for counseling. Therefore, you need to lead them. You need to be asking them more in-depth questions. And you do want to lead them by your questions because you want to draw them out, because you are taking them somewhere. You want them to see what the real issue is, again, which is almost never what they tell you in the beginning. Therefore, they say that we have family dysfunction, and so I'm going to ask, what are you both doing? What's going on? I'm asking them a functional question. I want to see what the behaviors are, the attitudes have been, what the words have been said that led to the family dysfunction. Now, they're going to have a list. They're going to say that, well, they'll just give you the list of everything that has happened, and nearly all of it will not be good. And you can actually turn this around. As they tell you these things, if they came in and said, well, I was biting and devouring my wife and I was yelling back at my husband, what you're going to say is, I bet you have family dysfunction, because this works backwards as well. And so they come in and say you have family dysfunction. You already know the answer to question number 2. Oh, you don't know the details. You don't know all the specifics. But what you could say, and you don't want to say this, but you could say, oh, you have family dysfunction? Well, I'm sure you're dishonoring each other. Now, again, you don't want to make statements. You want to stay away from statement making as much as possible. You always want to ask questions in counseling as much as possible, because you want them to learn. You want them to wrestle with it. You want them to discover. If they discover it, they will probably own it. This is a teaching concept. If you tell your child 2 + 2 = 4, it'll be harder for them to retain that. But if they wrestle through it and scratch it out on a piece of paper and then erase it because it made a mistake and then do it all over again, and they finally get it and they discover it, they will remember it. So you are leading them to discovery by the questions that you are asking. And so I ask them, what are they doing? They say they're dishonoring each other. Well, we need to go deeper than that. And so I say, the obvious question here is, why are you dishonoring each other? And they'll say, past and present conflict. Present conflict means whatever happened on the way to the counseling session. It could be what happened last night, probably does. What happened in the last few days, the last week, the last few weeks, could be the last few months. Could all be tied up in this idea of present conflict. But what you will also find is that there is a trail. No matter how long they have been married, there is a trail that leads to this present tense family dysfunction. If they've been married for a year or 5 years, 10, 20, or 30 years, conflict is accumulative. And if they're in counseling, that probably means that they don't have a sin plan, that they don't have a way of working through conflict. Therefore, all that they can have is this accumulative effect. It's like carpal tunnel syndrome, accumulative trauma. doing similar things over and over and over again until it builds such a mountain that things start breaking down. And so they're going to tell you all the present conflict. And then depending on how long they have been together, they will talk about the past conflict. And when it comes to things like this, memory, they have a long memory of the bad things that have happened to each other, and they typically rehearse those things to each other over and over again. And so you ask, why is there ongoing conflict? You see that my questions are really simple questions, but again, you are leading them. You're not giving them the punchline, even though you know what you already have an idea of what the problem is, the real core problem, but you can't tell them that. Not at this point, because they don't have categories. They don't have your understanding. And if you tell them what the real problem is at the very beginning, you'll jump so many links in the chain that it could be disruptive to the counseling relationship that you have with them. And so you want to massage this relationship along. And then simultaneously to that, you want to be building these relational bridges, because you know that you have some very important truth later on that might be hard for them to hear. And so you want to be careful how you communicate to them, and you want to take a long approach to doing that. That is one of the primary reasons that we counsel for 2 hours with people. We don't meet 55 minutes. We want to build relationally because we have a relational bridge to build, because we have important truth that we want to truck across that bridge. And if we haven't spent enough time with them, it could be hard for them to hear. Therefore, I'm asking somewhat basic questions. And so now I ask, why is there ongoing conflict? And they say, well, we don't communicate well. What's interesting about this statement is they could have come in and said, we don't communicate well, and that could have been their starting point. Because thus far, everything that's been said, they've said the same thing 4 different ways. They're talking about behavioral, functional, practical, above-ground issues, not heart-related, below-ground issues. Family dysfunction, behavioral. Dishonoring each other, behavioral. Talking about past and present conflict, again, external. We don't communicate well. Well, that's a given. And so even though I'm asking different questions, they're giving different answers, and so we want to move them along. And so I ask one more question. Why do you not communicate well? And this is where the counseling will begin to transition. They will say some version of, I'm frustrated, I'm stubborn, or I'm frustrated and he's stubborn, and I'm impatient or he's impatient, however it's said. And these might not be the exact words that they use. They might have 47 other words and they give you 50 altogether. And I have had people do this in counseling where they just rolled out the list, like here's all the issues. But what I really want you to see at this juncture in this counseling session is the transition. As I said, the first 4 things they said are all external. But there is a slight transition here with what they are saying. Now they are starting to move inward, move internally. Because frustration and stubbornness is tied to your will. Your will, of course, is inside of you. Impatience speaks to an attitude of the heart as well. Frustration, obviously, is tied to the heart, as James says in chapter 4, 1, 2, and 3. Why are you frustrated? He says what causes quarrels and conflict. But why are you frustrated? Why are you angry? Is it not this? You desire and you do not have, so you murder. And so frustration is tied to your desires, to the war within, as James talks about. And so it's important now what you have done is you have led them from all this behavioral talking that they have been doing, and you're now moving inside because you want to identify the true ruling motives of the heart is what's going on. And so therefore you continue in the process. Now, though I'm asking the question in this illustration, what is the primary problem, I want you to understand that this is really streamlined. We're just moving through an illustration, and you may not ask this last question here the way that it's revealed, what is your primary problem, but you do want to ask it some way, somehow, and you want to sculpt or customize the question in a way that they understand it, because you want them to get underneath this frustration, stubbornness, and impatience. You want to get them to articulate what is really going on in their thinking, what's going on in their hearts as to why they're frustrated, stubborn, and impatient. And what they're going to say, though they won't say it this way, but it will be some version of I am right and my spouse is wrong. He's wrong or she's wrong, but I am right. You can't have conflict unless there is this headbutting, I am right, you are wrong. Now, I realize that the sin in relationships is not equitable, meaning everybody's sinning the same or in the same proportion or the same degree. And I'm not suggesting that everybody's victimized the same way. It just doesn't work out that way. But both of them, to whatever degree it is, believe that each one of them is right and the other person is wrong. You can't have conflict otherwise. And so you want to lead them to this conclusion, and you want to get them to own this, that, well, yeah, I am being condescending. Yeah, I do believe I'm right and she is wrong. Yeah, I'm not valuing any portion of what she is saying because she's just wrong, and then she's saying some similar version of that. But the way that it translates out, even though, again, you might not say it as directly and clearly as what I'm saying here, but what they are saying is I am right, they're wrong, and until they change, we're going to continue to have conflict. And that is the bottom line. And so what I want to do is I want to restate it for them. I'm not going to make a statement, but I'm going to put it in a question form. And I want to say it in such a way to put a little edge on it so that they can, what I'm hoping is that the Lord will open their eyes. And by saying it in this edgy way, I want them to, I hope God would help them to see it more clearly. And so I asked this question, well, what you're telling me is you're better than your spouse. Now that is what they are saying. I am right, you are wrong is a better than, greater than attitude. Now you may be, and this is where people get tripped up, is say, well, I am right. Or I'm more right. I'm 90% right. Or I'm 75% right, and they're only 25% right. But we're not talking about it the correct way. And the truth is, I'm coming at this because whenever you attach frustration and stubbornness and impatience to it, you're not coming at it the right way. And so you may be right, and it is confusing for some people. It's like, yeah, you're right, but the way that you're communicating your rightness is wrong. And you're communicating your rightness, well, it really boils down to this. This is what you're saying in your heart of hearts. You are saying, I am self-righteous. Now, they're not going to say that, but that's what they're saying. They're communicating what they're saying in a self-righteous way. It could come across like the Pharisee in the temple looking down on a publican. God, I thank you that I'm not like this publican. I'm right. I'm more right than this person, and it's the attitude that's accompanied with that rightness that makes their rightness wrong, and it comes across as a self-righteous attitude. And what I want you to see in this illustration is where they began and where you have led them to. They began with bad attitude toward each other, a problem with each other, husband and wife. Where you have led them to their heart, they have a problem with God. And that's where you want to move the counseling, away from them to where they are combatants, and you want them to see that, no, the real core problem is the way that you think about God, that within your rightness, to whatever degree that is an awful attitude, and we know it's awful by the way that you're translating that attitude to the other person in this marriage. And you have a self-righteous spirit about you, and it's creating all this conflict. And until you humble yourself before God, until you are humiliated before God, you're not going to be able to communicate in a right way. You should be able to communicate your rightness without frustration, stubbornness, or impatience, but you aren't doing that. So there is something fundamentally flawed in how you interact with God. Now, if you can move them away from being those combatants to where they are talking to God in a humble way, and then as they approach each other again from a spirit of humility rather than a spirit of arrogance, you not only got to the heart of the matter, but now you can come back out of this thing to where their communication toward each other will be better, It will begin to reduce the conflict, and rather than dishonoring each other, they can honor each other, and that will cause the family dysfunction to go away. Let's take a coffee break. And I want to make an appeal to you. If you are able, would you be willing to support our ministry? We want to keep our resources free. We want to reach as many people as we possibly can. And by the mercy of God and the kindness of God and the grace of God on our lives, we have been able to reach every country in the world with our practical teaching of Jesus Christ. Every day our resources go around the world, but that cannot happen if people aren't underwriting our ministry. There are two aspects of you helping support our ministry. One, you benefit from it, which is quite important, and we want you to benefit from our ministry. But the second aspect is you partner with us to help us reach people who can't support us, or it's just not a possibility, but yet they can benefit as you benefit from our ministry. And so my appeal is, if you can support us for as little as $5 a month or $50 a year, would you do that? And also, would you be willing to share our ministry with the leadership of your church? Would you ask them to take us on? Say, we know these cyber missionaries. It's a missional work. They are helping people globally, and I think our church should help them. What do you think, Pastor? Leadership, and if you would make that appeal, that maybe they would take us on the way they take on missionaries and allow us to even do more than what we are doing now. So if you would consider that, I would be most grateful. We want to continue to free up our resources and make them available to any person, and if you could help, I would be most grateful. Thank you. This webinar that you just watched is part of our mastermind training. We have a team of students who come to our ministry and they want to be trained in how to disciple others well, starting with themselves, and then how to help others within their sphere of influence to whatever degree that may be. But that is our mastermind training, and if you're interested in it, let us know. This webinar is part of the 10-part series of Introduction to Biblical Counseling. You have been watching and listening to lesson number 7. Our ministry is helping people live effective lives. That's what we desire to do, and so let us know. If we can help you, it would be a joy and a privilege to do so. You can contact us at rickthomas.net. Thank you for listening to the webinar.